Hi everyone, Tony Tonkin here from Child Protection Party. Now I haven't spoken to you for a while. Oh, hold on, that was last week. Anyway, I should be speaking to you more often. Apologise for that. But I said to everybody, I think last year, that I'll try and make as many posts as I can when there's issues particularly that are concerning to me and to the Child Protection Party. And I have another one. Now, today I've had a couple of conversations from a mother who's got about 4 kids, I think, in care, and she's particularly concerned about a 14, 15-year-old daughter who has decided that she didn't want to live in the kin share arrangement that had been her placement since she was about 4 or 5, I think. And the interesting thing about this is that I keep reporting these particular instances over and over again. I've lost count of the number of times that I've talked about kids that are running away from care. And I've worked on occasions with the parents and the department around what to do, how to manage those situations, particularly when the children are saying that they want to return back to their biological family. And this is another case. It's not just another case. It's another case that highlights the ineffectiveness, the lack of professional standards employed by the child protection system in actually caring for kids, particularly those kids that are old enough to vote with their feet. In this system we say, and a lot of social workers will agree with me, that under all circumstances we should listen to what the children want. If the children are asking to be returned home, we certainly should give that some consideration. The weight that should be put on a child saying they want to come home should be considered. And in most cases, I would argue that particularly if the kids have been in care for some time and the parents have dealt with whatever were the issues that took the kids to be removed in the first place, then they certainly should have those children returned to them. In this particular case, the department has refused to have any conversations with the stepfather whatsoever about any of his behaviours. They still are lingering on his historical drug abuse, and I'm being told he hasn't taken drugs for the last couple of years. He's completely free of them, but however, they see that as being the blockage in relation to this child being returned to them. They have a negative view of this family, which I don't quite understand. I've had major conversations over the years with the father and the mother. And in this particular instance, though, the child has decided that the placement that she was in was physically, psychologically, and emotionally abusive of her. And she no longer wanted to stay in that placement, even though it was a close relative. The family, the parents, have made complaints about this placement over time, and the department has chosen to do nothing about it, but they argue all the time actually that the child can't be believed. Why is it that we take that attitude? I'll never know. Lots of kids have been abused sexually, physically and emotionally simply because they're not being believed. So that's a stupid, inappropriate and non-professional argument to take. And there have been many indicators that the child is being assaulted while in care. But the department have refused to do nothing because it's a kinship arrangement. There are a number of other kids also in that same placement, and I believe those kids have made the same complaints. In fact, there's an older child who has actually left, and she's made the same complaints as this 15-year-old has recently made. Now, the child has decided that she no longer wants to be in care in this particular placement. So what have the department done? They haven't listened to her. They've failed their duty of care in understanding that the legitimate complaints that this young person has of this placement are founded upon her understanding and her experiences, and they need to be validated. But they're not, because the department believes that whatever they do is in so-called best interest of the child, and they are refusing to admit that the other 2 or 3 children that remain in this home are also at risk. And if they had to consider these children at risk, they would then have to find other placements for them. And simply for the department, that's like too hard. Now, in the past, when I've had these sorts of complaints, I've gone directly to the minister. And even though we have a new minister at the moment, hate to say it, I'm not busting my guts in order to be able to go and make contact with her, because in the past it hasn't worked. The system is so heavily governed by the chief executive and people that sit below her and the social workers that we get very little response whatsoever. In this particular instance, though, I do believe that the guardian of children and young people has been involved as an advocate. Not too sure what that necessarily means. Don't hold a lot of hope for any change to be taking place there. However, at least the guardian can take note of what the child is saying and hopefully report that back to the government. Now, just in relation to some of the issues that have come up with regard to this child, is that she's reported being physically assaulted, emotionally and psychologically abused, as I've said before, that I suggested that the child go to the police. Police are reluctant to do anything about this, even though it's assault, because the police, under these circumstances, because they're GOM kids, tend not to believe them. Basically, what they tend to say is that because this child is a GOM kid, they can't be trusted. So it doesn't matter, like, I think back to the number of kids who have been sexually assaulted while in the care of the church, particularly a lot of churches, but particularly the Roman Catholic Church, and those children were never believed. The fact that we're still sitting in that space where we're not going to believe kids simply because, for no fault of their own, they are guardianship kids. It's horrific, and it's definitely inappropriate. So he was taken to care when she was 8, incidentally. So the department are saying that she just wants to party and that she doesn't want to... So they're stereotyping this kid. My understanding is that this kid's quite a shy, reserved child. And one of her complaints is that when she goes back to her new placement, which is residential care, which is basically a locked up placement, she has to get home. She's picked up from school, she's taken to school, she's picked up from school, she comes straight back to the residential care facility where technically she's locked in and she can't get out. She wants to go and meet with some friends, but she isn't able to do that. So the situation just tends to get worse and worse and worse for her. She has no sense of freedom. In fact, in a sense, she's a captive by the department within this residential care facility. And it's atrocious. Now, she also works at McDonald's. So here's a kid who has chosen to go out and find part-time work. She is relatively shy. She's a really good, lovely child, apparently. She doesn't act badly. She hasn't done anything that anybody could say, well, look, there's a kid that's way out of control. She is a child who has simply said, I'm being abused where I am right now, and I no longer want to stay in an abusive situation. So what has the department done? The department has moved her to a place in which she's in residential care. There's one other person in there who's intellectually challenged, I believe. So in other words, this person that I'm talking about can't have conversations with her. It's very much alone within this residential care facility. She's locked in there. She's not allowed out at all. And she gets taken to and from school simply because at the end of the day, they don't trust her. She simply wants after school, like most kids of her age, want to go out and meet out and hang out with their friends, which is fair enough. So why isn't it that the department aren't doing that? And of course, the other question here is, why is it that the department's chosen not to look at or review living with her biological family? Why can't they do that? Now, my concern is that this kid's been damaged while in care. Department have made that choice because they don't believe her, and now they've placed her in another placement which is just driving her crazy, from which when given the opportunity, I'm quite sure she'll make a choice about running from there as well. So what is it can the department do? The department can choose to leave her where she is and continue with the emotional and psychological abuse, or they can shift her to another placement, a family-based placement, or they could choose to have her return back to her mother and stepfather. The latter choice is probably the most appropriate, but if they make that choice, then they have to admit that their view of particularly the stepfather is inaccurate and unhelpful. But will they do that? I don't know. So we've had a number of people log on, and I do thank you for that. And I don't know whether there's any comments that anybody has made. I'll follow them up afterwards. Yeah, as Laura says, sounds pretty disgusting. Certainly is. Christine Crock, I'm told that at 12 plus, the children can self-place. Christine, no such thing. The children will, so there's no law that says that a child can make a decision at the age of 12. Technically, a child will be listened to once they reach 10, or they're at an age whereby they can articulate clearly their views. So in this particular instance, this child is making that decision about wanting to place herself back with her parents if possible, but that's not being permitted by the department. And I've known many cases like that over the years. Self-placement does not happen. Self-placement is when a child just does not refuse to go back to the care facility or foster care because they are extremely unhappy there. And I guess it's the department's decision to be able to make sure that if they do return home, that returning home is safe. I know of a young person I was working with last year who was in the same situation as the one I'm talking about, and she kept on running back home to her mother, and but the department seemed to be okay with this 15-year-old kid staying and living with a 25-year-old. That seemed to be okay by the department, but living with her mother, who, even though she had to give her some leeway around particularly alcohol, I think it was, that she was deemed inappropriate. So it's a complex situation. It's 12 intellectual disabilities allowed to choose where he wants. Tony, they're saying my son is 12 with intellectual disability. Well, Paul, if that's the case, I'm glad that he can choose. I can only talk about those cases that I know about, and I guess Paul, that particular person has the opportunity to be returned to you. Do I get away with child abuse and get the right, Jane? I agree. Right to have a children, put children in danger. It's Maria, not Paul. All right, Maria. Okay. And Maria, I just need to say that if they're saying that the child can make that decision and the child makes the decision to go back with you and they prevent that, then you know, like kind of what's getting in the way. Right. Child safety are not believers of returning children home for the parents. They are legalised kidnappers. They certainly do want to kidnap kids for varying reasons. Right. Okay, so look, if you've got any other comments that you want to make, any thoughts that you want to make about this particular case and how to deal with kids that are running away, I guess the point that I want to make is that departments like child protection departments are prepared to advocate for the rights of children, so they say. But when it comes to cases where children are actually able to make a decision about what it is they want in their lives, particularly when they're 13 to 15, 16 and so on, then why isn't it that we don't take note of them? Why is it that we choose not to listen to what is in the best interest of the child based on what the child is saying? Now that could mean that we can put services around that child to ensure that they're safe in a house that might be questionable, for example. But the point is that the department refuses to do nothing, and as a result of that, many of these children are left sitting in places where they're still being physically, emotionally and psychologically damaged by the decisions that the department makes, and there is no way in the world we can justify those sorts of decisions given the damages that they do. Thanks everybody for being with me. Take care, look after yourselves, and just remember that if you want any help from us, you can call us at admin@childprotection.party or on the number on our Facebook page. Thanks everybody for being with me. Take care, look after yourselves, and be safe.